Hey, it's Marcel. I am geeked up about my new book that just got released worldwide. If you haven't heard, it's called Humane Leadership Lead with Radical Love, Be a Kick Ass Boss. Now, if you love the podcast, you're going to love the book. I spent several years researching the best skills and behaviors of people leaders that engage employees and drive results through a humane approach of empowering humanity, developing trust, and getting the best out of people. It's out now. Get it wherever books are sold. Humane Leadership. Lead with Radical Love, be a kick ass boss. Check the link in the show notes and grab your copy. Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey gang, welcome back. So let me ask you something. Have you ever avoided a difficult conversation at work, even though you knew it needed to happen? Or maybe you hesitated to speak up in a meeting because it felt too risky, too uncomfortable. Well, you're not alone if those things have happened, because most leaders, they kind of know what they need to do, right? You're leaders. But the hard part, actually doing it, especially when it requires emotional courage. And today we're going to be diving into a conversation that, I personally feel every leader needs to hear about the real work of leadership, right? Facing your fears, discomfort, and being vulnerable, that ability to take on the problem with vulnerability head on. So my guest today to tackle all those issues and even more is the one and only Peter Bregman, the CEO of Bregman Partners, who wrote one of my all-time favorite leadership books, Leading with Emotional Courage: How to Have Hard Conversations, Create Accountability, and Inspire Action on Your Most Important Work. We're going to break down what emotional courage really is, why most leaders struggle with it, and how to build that kind of inner strength that lets you speak up, stand your ground and connect deeply with others, even when it's hard to do so. So a little bit about Peter Bregman. He is ranked by global gurus as one of the top 30 best coaches in the world and one of the top 30 best leadership speakers / trainers in the world. He is an award-winning best-selling author and contributor of 18 books, including most recently, You Can Change Other People, the 4 steps to help your colleagues, employees, even family up their game. For this conversation, though, we're going to be focusing on leading with emotional courage, since I already set the table. Okay, so here we go. Peter Bregman now joins us. Peter, welcome to the Love in Action Podcast.
Thank you so much, Marcel. It's really nice to be here with you.
Likewise, Peter. Okay, we start the episode like this. You ready?
Yeah.
What's your story?
So I could take the next 45 minutes and just talk. What's my story? So, I grew up in New York to share what just comes to me with this.
Yeah.
My mother is French and was in France during the Holocaust and hiding. My father's from New York, but his parents came over during the pogroms in Ukraine, Russia, Poland. And so I'm sort of born of this, growing up in New York, this relative safety of, I grew up with enough and had a good education. And always in the back of my mind, I have this sort of sense of, when's it going to be our turn? Every generation of my mother's family had to, for like 6 generations, had to leave a country, from Syria, Iraq, and Egypt. And so, I don't know why that particularly comes up as like the introduction to like, this is my story, but it's actually very much of a governing, not probably unconsciously at first, although I'm very aware of it, a governing driver in sort of what I do and how I do it. I started my career leading expeditions, mountaineering and kayaking with Knowles and with Outward Bound, and then started a few companies, and then worked in some consulting firms, and then started my current company, coaching, writing, coaching, and teaching,
Yeah.
mostly leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter, I've been following for a while, and the book, I've had the book for a while. I've read through it a couple of times, and but it's not a new book. I mean, this book was released in 2018, and so talk a little bit about the journey behind it, because I know you wrote a lot of blogs for HBR, et cetera. But and I'm going to tie it to the fact that I think in this day and age, emotional courage, and I'm going to let you define that, emotional courage in the year 2025 is even more important than ever before. I don't know if you agree with that, but walk us through the journey that led you to write that book. And then would you say this is so crucial these days?
Yeah. So the book really came out of a bunch of work that I did with this really remarkable woman named Anne Bradney, whose workshop I went to, probably 12 years ago for the first time. A very close friend of mine, this woman, Jessica Gelson, who I run a leadership program, the Leadership Intensive, and she and I designed it and run it together. Based a lot on this work in this book in some ways. But she said, you got to meet this woman, Anne, and you got to, come with me, and we'll do I've known Jessica my whole life, and so you got to come do this 5-day workshop. And like 5 days, like 5 days to go do a workshop. And then the stars aligned, and we had, I had an open time, and I went, and it was crazy. Like, people were doing things. People were yelling at each other. It was like the Wild West. It was like a room. It was like the old style tea groups in some ways, but it was a group of people who didn't know anybody, who didn't know each other. Some of them did kind of know each other. They would confront each other really aggressively. There was crying, there was laughing. And I was sort of scratching my head going, I know so much. I mean, this is sort of my arrogance coming out, but like, I know so much about communication. I know so much about leadership. I've been studying it my whole life. And I don't understand at all what's going on in this room, but it's having a profound impact on people. And people are making these communication choices, these choices in relationship to each other that I would never make. And I can't even understand where it's coming from. And yet it's having an impact of drawing people closer, not farther apart. So I was really interested and really curious. And I ended up doing a 4-year program with Anne. Run it anymore, but I ended up doing a 4-year program with Anne, and really, studying this kind of work, and also becoming certified in core energetics as a practitioner, kind of like a therapist, in this somatic therapy. And I started writing a lot about it. And so Leading with Emotional Courage came out of.
That's great. Is this the same one where people came from all over the world? Or,
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to come back to that, because we talked about one of the talking points here. So let me come back to that, because you have a kind of a story to share there. But I want to first, I'm going to pick out a few talking points for us to have a discussion. And so I picked out a few from the first part of your book. I think you have 4 parts.
Yep.
And I want to start with something that's so hard for leaders to do. And that is to receive feedback. Okay. So some of us love to give feedback, but we are often afraid to get feedback. We don't want to know what people really think about us. So you talk about the importance of staying curious about yourself. And to me, that's a mindset shift. So break that down for us, about staying curious about yourself. And in order to receive the feedback that you need.
Right. So you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm going to use this term. We'll both use this term throughout this conversation. So I do want to articulate or define emotional courage, like what we mean by that, because it actually requires a lot of emotional courage to be curious and to receive feedback, for example.
Right.
So we're going to do this in the form of an experiment, and and anybody who's listening, do the same thing. I'm not going to make you say it out loud, Marcel, don't worry. But think of a difficult conversation that you're not having, right? A difficult conversation you know you should have, but you've been putting it off and you haven't had. And anyone who's listening, do the same thing for yourselves. Think about a difficult conversation you have. Okay, you have one in mind?
I got one.
Okay, great. Now, I'm willing to bet 4 things. I'm willing to bet you know everything you need to know to have the conversation. I'm willing to bet that you are perfectly skilled enough to have the conversation. And I'm willing to bet that you've had time and opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so 9 times out of 10, we try to solve for those 4 things. We try to go, well, I got to learn how to do, if I'm procrastinating, I'm not doing something, I need to learn more about it. I need to understand it better. I need to be more skilled. I need to manage my time better. But those are not the things that get in our way. The things that get in our way is if you have that conversation, you're going to feel something. I don't know what, but you're going to feel something you don't particularly want to feel. And you may not know what, but you may have this sense of like, I may not want to feel it. They might be angry. They might be hurt. I just the uncertainty of how the conversation's going to go, the weird passive aggressiveness where they say, you know, thank you so much for the feedback. And then they don't talk to you for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is, you risk feeling something if you follow through with this action. And because you don't want to feel it, you don't follow through the action. And if you are willing to feel everything, if you're willing to feel the hurt and the shame and the anger and the passive aggressiveness, if you're willing to feel everything, then you can do anything. That is what stands in the way. And most of what we do, or most of what we try to avoid doing, is to either bring on or avoid a feeler.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to feel something. When someone wants to make a ton of money, why do they want to make a ton of money? You know, sometimes they want to make money because it's going to physically do some things for them, right? Like, you know, if I need medicine, I want money to buy medicine. But argue that mostly we want to feel certain things that we think money will help us feel. It might be a sense of security. It might be a delicious meal. But there's something that we're going to feel. Or in many, many cases, we are trying to avoid certain feelings. We're trying to avoid feeling insecurity. We're trying to, and emotional courage is incredibly freeing. Mm-hmm. Because if you are willing to feel everything, then you're free to take whatever action or not take whatever action you actually want to take, right? So emotional courage is when you feel. So now let's get back to your question of curiosity.
Yeah.
If I am curious about myself, I am willing to learn things about myself that I didn't know otherwise. Now, if I want to get feedback, and I'm actually a little bit of a strange person. I think you've had Marshall Goldsmith on your podcast. And Marshall and I have talked about this a bunch because he's a wonderful, wonderful. You know, everybody loves the concept of change until they have to change. And then they're not so happy with it, right? And it would be the same thing with feedback. Everybody loves the concept of feedback until they're the one receiving it. And then I actually love receiving feedback. And I think we should all be very, very skilled at giving it so that we make it easy for people to receive it. We should be skilled at receiving it. And I love it because I kind of want to know what you think of me.
Yeah.
And that would be good. But in order to do that, you need emotional courage. You need to realize, I need to realize that if I'm going to learn something about myself that I didn't already know, that will probably bring out a feeling in me. My feeling, by the way, at the beginning will probably be denial or resistance or defensiveness. It'll come out as defensiveness. Defensiveness, when you give people feedback, is annoying when you're giving them feedback, right? And you get frustrated. But I want to switch our perspective on that. And it should be totally expected that there is the most sane, normal, reasonable reaction to feedback is surprise and defensiveness. Because The reason I'm giving you the feedback is to share something about you that you may not recognize about yourself,
The
right?
blind spot.
It's your blind spot. And by definition, you don't see your blind spot.
Yeah.
So by definition, if I'm giving you feedback about your blind spot, you will be defensive because you will think to yourself, I don't do that.
Yeah.
That's the definition of a blind spot. So in terms of being curious about yourself, recognizing that when you receive feedback is to say, if someone gives you feedback and it seems completely off from your experience of yourself, the smartest, most effective response is to get super curious, because it's this massive gift that says someone sees something about, now you might be wrong. I could write you off. I could do all that, but there's a chance that you see something about me that I don't see about myself. And that's interesting because I'm never going to see it about myself until I get it from you. So you need emotional courage to be willing to feel that.
Yeah.
But if you prioritize growth and learning over a stable sense of self in some sense, like a comforting view that everything's okay and you're fine and nothing will go bad, then you can be open to that. And in fact, that supports you in living the kind of life where nothing goes bad or, little is under your control. Possible.
Yeah. And that, thank you. That is so good. But Peter, also, you gotta also understand what's going on the other side of the fence, that the person giving you feedback maybe has the right parameters. I don't know if that's the right word, so that you are getting honest, unfiltered feedback, right? But sometimes people don't give you clear and honest feedback. They kind of skate around the issue. They're, maybe it's the boss asking the employee, and the employee's going, "Wait a minute, no, this is a little awkward," and
Right.
so they don't give you the full truth. So because they may think that you're going to get defensive, and next thing you know, is my job safe anymore? I'm giving my boss honest feedback that he is, not exactly doing the right thing or acting the right way, etc. So how do we maybe prepare the other side to sort of be in that expectation of, okay, I have to give my boss clear and honest feedback, and how do I not personalize it so I make him defensive? So what happens on the other side as well?
Yeah. So what I would say, first of all, on the receiving end, but I'll say on the receiving end, because this will help people give us feedback.
Mhm.
As and I've written this in one of my books. It might be in Leading with Emotional Courage. This idea of don't confuse the package with the message. And the idea is, like, people will often be clumsy in their communication. That's just life. Like, people are not the best communicators all the time, especially if they're nervous about something. So, do your own work so that when someone comes to you with feedback, you're not overly reactive.
Yeah.
Not reactive at all, actually. You're appreciative. And if they might be wrong, they might have misunderstood you, but it is not your job when someone's giving you feedback to clarify what you meant. That is not your job. And your job is not to help them give you feedback in a better way.
Yeah. Because now you're controlling the outcome. So it's not, yeah.
Your job is not to do any of that. Your job is to say thank you. Is to receive it and say thank you. And then you might have some clarifying questions, but you're not defending your behavior in that way. You're just learning how someone perceives you.
Yeah.
When you're giving feedback, which is your question, I would say the best thing to do is to do it the way you ask the question, which is to say, I have some feedback. First of all, are you open to hearing it? Like, I don't have to share it, but if you're interested. And then they'll say, yeah. And then you say, I don't, like, I don't know, it's a little scary. Like, you're my boss and I don't want this to come off wrong, and I want to be supportive. And I'm sharing this in the hopes that it's successful, but I might do it badly and I might do it awkwardly. And, like, I ask for your forgiveness in advance.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, don't worry about it. I mean, I don't know what they're going to say, but when you precede your giving feedback with humility and an acknowledgement, you're not attacking them. And also think about why you're giving them the feedback. Like, think for yourself about, what is my intent here? Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Am I trying to knock them down a peg, or am I trying to help them to be the best? Am I trying to just defend myself by projecting onto them? Like, what's going on for me? To ask yourself that question so that you're sure that it's clean. And then I would be humble and go like, going to do this so well, and it makes me nervous to do it, but I wanted to share it in case this is helpful. Here's something that I'm seeing. And I think it makes it much easier both to receive it in that way, and it also is much easier to give it in that way.
Right. But it really starts with you stepping into that role curiosity. That there's the mind shift right there, to keep from getting defensive or going into shame or getting angry, etc. Right? Is to be curious about yourself. Okay, I am emptying myself as a vessel right now because I want to know what my blind spots are.
Right.
And receive that. Okay, before we hop off the whole feedback bandwagon, there's some tips that you gave. I'm gonna just speak it out loud and tell me if you react to any of these, right? Straight from your book. Okay, so if we want to increase our chances of hearing the truth, really, but doing so in a way without getting defensive, you offer these. Be clear that you want honest feedback. So it starts with you kind of setting the expectation. You can say what you mean. Say what you really want to say, right? Focus on the future, which is more problem solving and looking at solutions rather than looking through the rearview mirror and about what you did wrong in the past. Probe more deeply. I love this. Don't just ask once. Maybe you offer the opportunity for that person to give you honest feedback several times, right? The first time may not work. Listen without judgment. That's very self-explanatory. You want to listen receptively without judgment. And the last one I love, write down what they say, because as you write down what they're saying, there's pause. They may think of something else that you need to hear. Maybe another blind spot. Anyway, any of those pop out at you from your own book?
Yeah. I think that was great advice wherever you read that. What I would say is, I kind of want to expand on one point.
Yeah.
Which is, we call it feedback, right? Which is, I'm going to talk to you about something you did or that you're doing or something that should change. And then we talked about, focusing on the future. The way I think about it is, the feedback part, the talking about the past, is a springboard to have the conversation about the future. The conversation about the future is much more interesting, hopeful, amenable to people in having the conversation. And I think, what you're really saying is, hey, this, I noticed in the meeting that you started to lose people, right? That started to lose people. I think it comes from, so that's like, I'm saying the thing, you're starting to lose people. I'm going to assign a root cause to it, which may or may not be right, but I think it might be from how often you spoke. Like you kind of had a lot to say, and a lot of it was good, but you spoke a lot in terms of percentage of the meeting and percentage of other people who were speaking. And that the longer you went, I'm already going too long. And I want to talk about how you could be more effective in future meetings. And now that part might have been 30 seconds, but the next 10 minutes, we're going to have a conversation about how to be more effective. And people often don't give feedback that way because, first of all, they just want to be able to say, hey, I was annoyed that this happened. And second of all, they don't necessarily know what the solution is.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what the solution is. They kind of, they just sort of want to give it so you figure it out. Just talk less in the meeting. Well, it's really a good solution, right? And that ends up being a spiral. And then they're not going to talk at all in the meetings, or they're going to, but instead to think together, like what, how do you prioritize? How do you decide when to speak or when not to speak? Well, I just speak when I have something, something I think to offer. It's like, okay, well, what other criteria could we use? Like, like that's one criteria. The other criteria is how much do you care about this particular thing? Like, you might have something to offer, but it doesn't really matter, and it's not mission critical. And like, if you're going to choose to only speak 3 times in the meeting, this probably isn't where you want to spend that shit.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be, one of the things. And then another is going into the meeting, what's the outcome that you want? What's the impact that you want to have on the meeting? Do you think about that before the meeting? Because that was, so anyway, my point is the conversation is one of growth and development and future versus one of here's all the things you did wrong and you should just stop doing wrong things, which isn't very effective.
Yeah. And we know that we're both coaches. So, I mean, that's how we move things forward with our clients, right? That forward movement there. Okay. I want to ask you let's return to this, this story that you mentioned where you were part of a workshop led by Anne Bradney with people from all over the world. Okay. So something happened in that story, that involved a heated debate, and you got triggered. And I want to tie that story into what's going on around the world today, and how easily it is for people to get triggered by their own inner voices, their confirmation bias that keeps us from healthy, constructive dialogue to bring people to the table and understand someone's perspective, because we're now so divided by political ideologies and how we view the world, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you do that, there's a quote I want to use maybe to bring it home about empathy, but I'll let you kind of guide the way.
Yeah. So that story was one where I got triggered with someone in the group. I was doing some process work around the Holocaust, and someone in the group had a German accent.
Okay.
Was speaking English and was actually, it's a long story, but was hitting a cube, which is part of the process, like hitting a big foam cube with a tennis racket and kind of yelling, but in a German accent. And then he switched over from speaking speaking English in a German accent to speaking German.
Mm-hmm.
And it really like triggered all this Nazi stuff for me.
Yeah.
And I went, I kind of, I got triggered and I sort of went off on it.
Yeah.
And which was also part of the process. Like, that's the rules of the game that we were playing, which is that you sort of follow your impulses and see where they take you, and then see what's underneath those impulses. It's a wonderful freedom to have, to understand your unconscious drives when you let them play out, where they bring you, and then you become to uncover them. It's almost like awake dream work, right? You kind of figure out what's driving you that you don't necessarily even know is driving you. So I did it, and I just went off on it. And in that moment, I was like, ready to kill this guy. This guy to me was a Nazi. Except, as I say in the book, he wasn't. He was like a software engineer from Germany.
Right.
And actually, I don't think I say this in the book, but what he was hitting about and screaming about, I might have said, can't remember, but what he was hitting about and screaming about at the time was his love life and sex. So he was actually, talking about the opposite of what, meanwhile, the way I'm feeling the energy is he wants to kill me and I'm going to kill him first. And it was a real way. I was scared of people in the room, and to learn from that and to go, wow, that's interesting. Like in that moment, and again, this is what I write in the book. In that moment, he wasn't the Nazi, I was.
Ooh.
Because I was ready to like kill this guy for his accent.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what Nazis do. That's not what I do. And so to me, it was a real wake up call, a real moment of insight that, first of all, that like we if we don't acknowledge the shadow side in ourselves, it's going to leak out in insidious ways and in ways where we can do damage to the world. So it's one of the reasons why I like this kind of work is it feels really important to uncover the parts of you that you pretend don't exist or would like to not exist and would like to just project onto other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I read?
Wrote this great poem about how to make an enemy. And it sort of talks about this very thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Sorry that I interrupted. I want to read this, your own words, okay? And ask for reaction. It makes us feel better to separate ourselves from people whose behavior we don't like. It makes us feel moral, safe, and beyond reproach. But it's a false confidence. Separating the other people as evil means we are more likely to lash out at them and, before we know it, become cruel ourselves. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I stand behind everything that I wrote.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it now, like you made this analogy or this link to what's going on now. And I see it. It's funny. I was on the phone with a client today, and I'm going to tell you the sentence that this person said. And I'm hearing this all the time, and I'm not taking a political stance one way or the other with this. I'm just talking about the sentence. And the sentence started with, look, I don't want to give Trump credit for anything, but this thing that he did, I don't know, was it good? But I don't want to give him credit for anything. And I think that's such an interesting moment. That moment that goes, I so dislike this person. I have so constructed. And by the way, you might be listening to this, whoever's listening, you might be interested in going, yes, he is evil, or the opposite. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he's our savior, or whatever you think. But when you put him in these categories, you lose curiosity in a sense, but you put him in these categories, you no longer actually really listen, and you're no longer really watching, and you've lost your curiosity. And it frustrates people a lot when we talk politics and we're in the middle of some, political discussion. And my answer often, because it's sort of how I feel, is I'm really curious. And my curiosity doesn't mean I agree or it doesn't mean I disagree. But I don't know how this is going to play out. And I see some good things that can come of it, and I could see some bad things that can come of it. I really don't know how it's going to play out. But when I was younger, I'm in my, I'm 57. When I was younger, there's this great bumper sticker I saw which said, hire a teenager while he still knows everything. When I was younger, I had a tremendous amount of certainty. I knew, I was president of political organizations, and I had tremendous certainty. I think for me, wisdom, and it takes emotional courage to have this kind of wisdom, is sits in uncertainty as much as it sits in certainty. And like clever is certain, but wise is actually uncertain. And that doesn't mean you don't take action, and it doesn't mean you don't, but I've seen lots of people take action that they feel is like 100% for the good that turns out not to be.
Yeah.
And I've seen people be the things that they're totally against actually turn out to be good.
Yeah.
And I think it takes humility.
Yeah.
To see all sides of it and not to just write people off as evil. I don't think half this country is evil. However, I mean, we're talking in America right now. Whatever side you're on, I don't think the other side is evil. But I think the narrative that I hear is half the people are saying you're evil, and the other half are saying you're an idiot. And like, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that's our way forward. I don't believe that it's true, but I believe that it closes us off. So I'm going to double and triple down on this idea of curiosity and lack of certainty, which doesn't mean lack of action.
Right.
Because you have to take action in uncertainty. but that takes emotional courage. And I think when people start to take action, they double down on their certainty because it makes them more comfortable to take action in the face of certainty. And I think it takes a tremendous amount of courage to say, I'm going to take action in this situation, though I don't know for sure that it's right.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. It's really putting yourself out there, and gosh, that's good. That's good, Peter. All right, so the last part of your book.
I'm going to add one more thing to it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did drop, but I want to tie it to the leadership piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is in my coaching. I'm coaching C-suite and very senior leaders and senior government leaders, prime ministers. And I would say that the higher up you go in an organization, the more you're making decisions based on bets. So, and I have this conversation with leaders all the time. Like, it's a bet. We're all playing probabilities. When you're really junior in an organization, you just enter, you look up. I remember this when I was in my first few jobs. Like, you look up and you think, oh, these guys know. So I don't know anything. I got to learn. But the guys on top, they've had a lot of experience. They know what's going on. They know what they're doing. And I think it's the exact opposite. I think there's no time your job, there's no time that you have more certainty about the work that you're doing than when you're like an intern, because you're just doing what you're told. But at the higher levels, everything's ambiguity. And one of the things that I try to teach leaders is you have to be careful about your pursuit of consensus. And the reason for that is because consensus assumes everybody's on the same page. But any real decision you make that's worth making is going to have a percentage chance of being wrong. And because of that, there will be other people on the side of that bet. That's how markets work. That's how bets work. So whatever bet you're making, there will be other people who are on the other side of that bet. And your job is to get them on your side of the bet because you all have to execute together, but recognizing that it's a bet, that you may be wrong. And you're not getting, if you work too hard to get everybody happy and everybody in agreement with your perfect decision, you're not going to be making the decisions that you have to make, because at a senior leadership level, you are always deciding based on probabilities.
Peter, we have so many CEOs listening. Okay, so we're definitely speaking to the right audience here. So I want you to speak to that person, the high level leader. Maybe they're a founder of a startup, and they want to shape a company culture that brings out more emotional courage in people, not just their leaders, but in their people. What would you say is a good starting point to start with the culture piece?
So when I was early in my career, I was running a very, very big project at American Express. And Harvey Golub stepped in as CEO. I think it was Lou Gerstner who was there before him. And Harvey Golub was this big guy, and he wore suspenders. And within 3 weeks of his becoming CEO, a third of the men at American Express in the offices that I were in were wearing suspenders. And, people model themselves after their leaders. So the number one thing that I would say, and by the way, I don't even know if it was conscious. I don't think they were like, oh, he's wearing suspenders, I'm going to get suspenders, I'm going to look like the CEO. I don't think they did that. But I think we model ourselves consciously, unconsciously after our leaders. So what I would say is, if you're a CEO and you're listening to this, your most important job, if you want to create a culture of emotional courage, is to have emotional courage. Your most important job: ask for feedback, receive feedback, make hard choices, be vulnerable, be honest. Like, none of us are superhuman. And so you don't have to be superhuman. So showing up there's nothing more courageous than vulnerability. And by the way, there's nothing that projects strength more than vulnerability. And there's nothing that projects weakness more than projecting invulnerability.
Oh, that's good.
And so, I would say the most important thing as a senior leader is to be real and to be human and to be vulnerable and to be clear and to be curious, uh, and to make decisions. But recognizing that they may be right, they may be wrong, but they're your best bet. And it doesn't mean you're not doubling down on it, because you can double down on it. I think all of those things uh, really breed a culture of emotional courage.
That's awesome. Love that. Okay, I know that we're running out of time, and I want to give you a chance to plug your more recent book, which came out in 2021. I mentioned it in the intro. It's You Can Change Other People. Tell our readers what they can expect from that book.
So the book is really a sort of distillation of a, a basic process of coaching that I use. Sort of, a good friend of mine, Howie Jacobson, who I've done a lot of work with, and I used to run a master level coach training that he came to a bunch, and then I said that I was going to stop. He sort of announced, to his surprise, because I hadn't spoken with him about it, that this was the last coach training that I was going to run, and I'm going to be focused on other things. And he got very upset, and he said, well, let's write a book together and put this stuff down. And so it's really a distillation of, how you support other people in making the changes that they want to make in their lives, and how do you coach them in a way. And so I think it's useful for leaders. It's useful for coaches. It's useful actually for parents. It's, if you want to empower people to change, but you want to do it with a pretty good hit rate that allows them to make choices that they want to make, to move in the directions that they want to move. And you're the catalyst for making that happen, which, as managers and as leaders and parents, like anybody in those roles, our success is dependent on our ability to do that. That's what the book is. It's sort of very practical in that way.
That's great. Okay, Peter, we bring it home with 2 questions, as we do with every guest. Here's the love question we ask every guest, okay? How do we lead with more actionable, practical love day in and day out?
I think for me, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and it has felt more and more important to me. This is a very tricky transition, because it's subtle, but what is the intention behind your action? And for me, more and more, I want the intention behind my action to be one of service. And I think it's easy to say, and everybody says it, and I've said it, but it's not entirely true. Like I've wanted my books to be bestsellers. I like speaking in front of really big crowds. I like making them laugh. I like teaching them stuff. I like success. I like when I coach really important people in the world. Like all of that I like, and that drives me. And it's easy for that to overwhelm this other piece.
Mm.
And or not to be the drive, like both pieces are there, but what are you really acting out of? I think if you really look at what I've acted out of over my career, it's changed over time, for sure. And it changes based on the situation. But I'm very interested now in the driving factor being one of service. How can I be really helpful? And what does this situation require? And do I have the capacity to show up in a way that can support us moving in that direction?
Yeah, beautiful.
To me, that's acting out love.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, bring us home. What's that one thing you want people to take away from this conversation and maybe from your book?
I would say from this conversation, let's say with the emotional coach theme, we've been hammering at it for the last hour. Really be willing to take risks and keep pushing the edge. You don't have to go so far out of your comfort zone that, as my friend Murmur Blakesley likes to say, like in your yikes zone. you don't have to be in your yikes zone, but to be in your, outside of your comfort zone, expand your comfort zone. And when you first said like, and then when you finished that sentence, you said, and from your books, I would say the thing that I care most about for myself, and I would encourage people to really care about, is to prioritize learning over everything else. Like, I love learning. I find it interesting. I want to know more. I want to act more. I love ideas. And I would say, if you orienting, there are worse things than orienting your life around learning and becoming better at what you do and knowing more and a better version of who you are. And so I would just encourage people to keep doing that.
Love it. It's a great way to end. Peter, if people want to connect with you, learn more about you, where can they go?
If you go to bregmanpartners.com, BREGMANPARTNERS.com, there's plenty of stuff there.
It's been a pleasure. It was fun.
Thank you, Marcel. Really fun. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. Keep the conversation going, folks, with hashtag Love in Action Podcast, and spread that out on social media, and look for my show notes at marcelschwantes.com. For Peter and yours truly, remember, in the end, love wins. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.